How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Fordham Firesides. We are back with my absolute favorite segment from this show, top music albums of a certain decade. Fritz is back. He's back from abroad.
What's up, folks?
Yeah, so it's been a bit because we did the 90s way back in June, and here we are in 2020, finally coming back with our 1980s list. And hopefully we can bang out 70s and 60s before graduation. That's my plan. I kind of want to do it. I probably would prioritize this segment over anything else because even though it's not the most viewed thing I do on this channel, I like doing it the most. So I think we're going to get right into it. We're going to change up the format a bit.
Yes, new format. New decade.
Yeah, new decade. We want to make this go faster. So the way we're going to do it is I think I'll do my top or my 10 through 6. Fritz will do his 10 through 6. Then we will alternate doing our 5, 4, 3, 2, and then give our honorable mentions, and then do number 1. So, the 1980s. This is probably the hardest one so far for me. I just feel like the further back we go, the less music I've listened to. But I have enough for a top 10. But it's not as like it's not my favorite decade, but there's a lot of good stuff on here. So like my top picks, I'm very excited about.
Yeah, same. I feel like these top picks for me have been like albums that I've been listening to for a really long time, and love them. Love the 80s.
Yeah. 80s are a cool time. They're hot these days with Stranger Things and all that stuff. But,
yes, sir.
But yeah, I'll get right into it with my number 10. I have Tears for Fears, Songs from the Big Chair. They are a iconic synth pop band, but they kind of straddle the line between like the very 80s commercial sound and more progressive pop. I think this album ages really well, even though the album cover, which you can see here, is very corny looking, looks very 80s, and a lot of this synth pop stuff ages horribly. I think this album is just a lot of fun, but also pretty at times, and reminds me a lot of Depeche Mode, who I really, really like. But it's a fun pop album with some fantastic songs all the way through. I highly recommend it. It's definitely the most like 80s sounding album that I have on my list. Also, this album has Everybody Wants to Rule the World on here, and I mean, come on, you can't forget the greatness of that song. So, Tears for Fears, Songs from the Big Chair. Number 9, I have Tom Waits' Rain Dogs. This is a weird album. Tom Waits, he's a singer-songwriter, iconic guy. He's been operating for like 4 decades at this point. Yeah. He's still making music. But this is the point where his previous album to this, Swordfish Trombone, he got weird. Here he got really weird. He's known for his really husky, sleazy voice. It kind of sounds like pirate music. The instrumentals are just kind of bizarre and otherworldly. Like, listening to it, the lyrics don't have like very like straightforward meanings. It's just kind of like having a jockey full of bourbon and like drinking and stumbling through like the streets at night and stuff. It's just very sleazy, weird. Not the most accessible thing out there, but it's kind of fascinating to listen to.
Absolutely.
So Rain Dogs. Number 8, I have Violent Femmes with their self-titled album. The only album of theirs I've listened to, but no one really talks about any of their other stuff.
The best one. It's got the hits.
Yeah, it's got the hits. It's kind of like the only folk punk album out there that I could actually cite, and it sounds way ahead of its time. It has like a very 90s teenage angst vibe, yet it came out in like 1981. Which is kind of telling because like they had a second wind of success in the 90s when their music sounded like much more at home.
Yeah.
And the lyrics are all about like drugs and depression, and it's really miserable and like sad stuff, but the songs are so fun.
Yeah.
And it's all these like really catchy, bouncy guitar rhythms with like very simple instrumentals, and yeah, the stuff is still played today. I still hear like Blister in the Sun played at like sports games and stuff. It's kind of crazy. Also, they're a band from Milwaukee, and there's not a lot of those. So
nice. I didn't know
I
that.
appreciate that. Number 7, I have Talk Talk, The Color of Spring. Talk Talk is a very interesting band because they only released 5 or 6 albums. They started off as a basic synth pop band. Everybody knows the song It's My Life, like a very standard, it's a great song, but it's a very standard like new wave synth pop song from the 80s. And they transitioned into like this art pop sound where they did away with synthesizers entirely and just focused on horns and strings and like tasteful piano chords. And it still has like some of the same like emotions that are evoked from their synth pop stuff. But they do it in a lot more like simple way, and it's really fascinating. I think this album's really underrated. I feel like their legacy is more defined by their last two albums, where they kind of transitioned to a jazzier, drawn-out post-rock type music with Spirit of Eden and The Laughing Stock, which are also great albums. But this one, I probably like Laughing Stock more. That's an album I kind of missed when I did my 90s list. But Color of Spring, very underrated, really awesome, great art pop album. And then at number 6, I have probably one of the most influential alternative albums of all time. And this is the Pixies with Doolittle. It's a bit lower on my list than maybe it would have been a couple years ago, probably because I don't listen to it as much, but I still really like it. But Pixies, they've influenced everyone from like Nirvana to Radiohead. You can still hear their influence in like Cage the Elephant today. It's really like abrasive but catchy. Like they have a great sense of melody, and it can be a little off-putting at times when they're like Frank Black is like screaming, and I don't know. They coined the idea of being very quiet and then like exploding when it comes to the chorus, which is something you see in like Nirvana's music. And every song on this album is like a banger. Like Here Comes Your Man is the most accessible song on there. It's great. And then Debaser is fantastic. Monkey Gone to Heaven, Hey, like they just have like such a unique sound. There's really nothing like them to this day, even though their influence is everywhere. They just have such a unique vibe. And yeah, it's great. Pixies, Doolittle, amazing album.
All right, moving on to my top 10. At number 10, we have Murmur by R.E.M. This is actually an album that I came around to while doing some listening for this podcast. I used to think it was kind of like not that great, but now I've really been sold on it. I just think the pop sensibilities on this album that R.E.M. obviously continued to develop, and as they became basically a full like chart-topping pop group, are really great. There are great songs on here like, Moral Kiosk, Pilgrimage,
Radio Free
Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is an absolutely amazing album, and I'm glad I re-gave it a listen, because it's one of the best. And it started the whole college rock phenomenon, which maybe some other bands on this list will have kind of taken the torch forward with.
Another album that sounds like very 90s, 10 years before the 90s.
Oh yeah. Well, and just like kind of jangle pop like stuff that was kind of like sounded like the Smiths and other bands of that genre. But I think R.E.M.'s Murmur is an essential for alternative rock fans. At number 9, I've got Public Enemy, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. This is another one that I revisited with this list. And I just think that Chuck D has maybe the most iconic, just powerful voice in all of hip-hop, even to this day. On this album, they kind of started the trend of just basically noise being a part of the beat. They have like what came to be known as like the kettle, like high-pitched ringing as like a very essential part of their beats. Flava Flav is hilarious and awesome, and it's a great contrast between Chuck D's very political and raw lyricism, and I don't know, I think the beats on this are amazing. I think pretty much every song hits, and Public Enemy, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. Number 8, I have probably, for me, this is the most 80s album, is XTC's Skylarking.
Haven't listened to it, but I know it.
This is an album where I guess all three of these are ones that I re-listened to, but this one I had listened to the first 2 tracks, which go right into each other, about 100 times. And when I finally got through it, the combination of 60s kind of sunshine pop that Todd Rundgren really brings out, and the 80s synthesizers and drum machines, which are the backbone of the album, make for a totally unique listen in my experience. And I just think that every song on this album has something that I'm really attracted to in terms of production or melody or lyricism. I think some of my favorites on this album are Earn Enough for Us, Grass, and the opening track, Summer's Cauldron, and Dear God, which I think wasn't on the initial pressing, but is XTC's biggest single. At number 6, I have, or number 7, sorry. At number 7, I have Dinosaur Jr.'s You're Living All Over Me. I think that this album has some of the best guitar work by far. It totally earned Jay Mascis's reputation as a pioneer in guitar music. I think his use of stacking pedals to just bring out some really crazy sounds and guitar solos is totally revolutionary, as well as being songs you can totally sing along to.
On like little furry things, just the guitar, and that's fantastic.
Oh yeah, and the opening track, that is the opening track. Just that guitar that just sounds like a gust of wind blowing in, and I think just the melodies on this album are absolutely incredible, as well as the drumming and the production style. I know like an anecdote about this album is that when they had it mastered by SST, they had it turned all the way up, so it was actually distorting the master tape, and the producer was like, "Why do you want this?" And they're like, "No, this is exactly how we wanted it to sound. It's just blowing out speakers all across America," and also continued kind of some of the college rock, it continued the college rock phenomena, even though it sounds completely different than REM. At number 6, I have Violent Femmes, self-titled album. This one has been with me for a long time, from first hearing like Add It Up and Tony Hawk's Underground 2.
Okay.
I just think that this album is maybe the best folk punk record ever, and way ahead of its time in terms of defining that genre. And I just think every song on this album is an absolute banger, from Add It Up to Blister in the Sun, Gone Daddy Gone.
Great song.
Good Feeling. Every song on this is a great document of teen angst and post breakup feelings.
Kiss Off is probably my favorite.
Kiss Off is amazing. And I just think this is a totally revolutionary album that everyone should give a listen
100%.
to.
Easy listen to. It's like
absolutely
not,
it's short.
Unlike Tom Waits, which is weird. Like this is
an hour long.
Yeah. All right. So now we're into our top 5. We will alternate here. My number 5 is The Talking Heads, Remain in Light. Sick album. I actually had the pleasure of seeing David Byrne's Broadway show just like less than a month ago, and it's so good. And just the way this album uses rhythm and like these like popular African drum beats is like the backbone of the album is completely unheard of for the time. He messed around with it a bit on the opening track of their previous album, E Zimbra, and like this album just takes that to the next level, and he uses that as the entire instrumental palette from like front to back. It's got like lyrically, David Byrne has this like modernist paranoia that kind of like works with Radiohead's OK Computer as well. Like sometimes it's a little abstract what he's saying, sometimes it's a lot more clear, like in Once in a Lifetime, just like living in a big house and driving a car, and it's just like it's kind of like a critique of society, but not in like an overbearing way, and more of like, he's kind of fearful in the way things are. But it's fascinating how this album uses just like repetition and building layers, and there's just stretches where like the same thing happens for like a good minute in like a song, but it's just so like infectiously catchy. It's such a cool listen. Not like, maybe not what people associate with Talking Heads right away. Like people probably know like Burning Down the House or like Road to Nowhere, those sort of things. But they got a little more poppy, a little more catchy. But this is like a transitional album, and it's one of the defining albums of the 80s, of all time even. It's only my number 5 on this list because there's stuff I like more, but it's such a cool album. Everyone should listen to it.
All right, at number 5 for me, we have Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables by the Dead Kennedys. I think, to me, I'm a big punk fan, and to me, many punk albums just are not necessarily great for the whole listen, especially albums from this era. But I think that Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables by the Dead Kennedys is an absolutely amazing album. A lot of the lyrics satirize the Reagan era politics. Songs like "Kill the Poor," "Let's Lynch the Landlord," "Holiday in Cambodia," "California Uber Alice," and the guitar playing on this album is also amazing, taking inspiration from surf music. Jello Biafra's vocals are insane. They sound like the ramblings of a madman sometimes, But the political commentary and social satire on this album, I think, is really on point. And in addition to that, they created a lot of songs that you can really sing along to and get into. And I just think that this album stands out amongst the pack of 80s punk and hardcore releases. And for me, it's the best of all of them. Dead Kennedys, Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables.
I've never listened to them. I know of them, but yeah.
You would recognize, my music and taste is obviously very influenced by Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, but they have 10 songs from that album in those games.
Okay.
So you'd recognize.
I probably would. I've heard
yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
All right, my number 4, probably one of my favorite bands, and this is easily their best album, The Cure, Disintegration. This album is just epic. It's so good. The Cure, they've done a weird thing throughout their career, and I think they're coming back now, but they would alternate with punk synth poppy album, really dark and edgy and post-punky, and then back to pop, and then this is the album kind of towards the end of their not the end of their career, but the end of their peak,
their initial run.
Yeah, this album came out in '89, end of the '90s, and it kind of summarized everything they had done and put it into one album, and it just works better than any of their albums beforehand. Even though I love The Head on the Door and I love Pornography, Disintegration is just, I don't know, it's a fascinating listen. It just takes these huge sounds, and it's dark, it's heavy. Some songs are just brutal to listen to, but it never stops being catchy and goth rock music. So many songs on this thing are just incredible. Love Song is probably the one people know the most, especially because Adele covered it on a 21 album. That song just has a great bass line. And then there's moments Pictures of You or Fascination Street that just I don't know, it's a wave of sound coming down in your head, but it's never too abrasive or weird. It's just I don't know. It's a beautiful, epic music, and I highly recommend this album to anyone.
And at number 4, I also have The Cure, Disintegration. Yeah, to add on to what Hank is saying, I just think this album is amazing, particularly the way that synthesizers will be layered one after another and just creating a cascading wave of sound that really takes you in and puts you into the world of Robert Smith. Another thing I think is interesting about this album is the fact that Robert Smith was about to turn 30, and in his mind, he had conceptualized that all great artists make their magnum opus before 30, and he was dying to just make his greatest album, and I think he did.
Yeah, he did.
And what can you say that hasn't been said by Hank?
If anything, it's a bit long, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it's so cool, and what the Spider song is so good. I don't know, it's just no, not Spider, Lullaby.
Yeah.
Jeez, oh man, I can't have that on camera, that messing up the song.
Yeah.
But 100% recommend checking this out. I'm sure people have heard plenty of Cure songs, but this is the one you should listen to.
Yeah.
My number 3 is Sonic Youth, Daydream Nation. Probably would have been my number 1 if I did this last year. But then I just listened to stuff that I felt did a better job of capturing the 80s, I think. Because this album sounds very 90s, which is kind of a recurring theme on both of our lists.
Yeah.
But Sonic Youth, they're a band with a very prolific discography, and I honestly have not listened to most of it. I've listened to this album, I've listened to Sister, I've listened to Evil, and I've listened to Goo. Yeah. But this is the one that I love. It just has... It was kind of the first noise rock album, noise pop album, but it has just such a beautiful sense of melody throughout the guitar work, throughout the entire album. It's got this kind of angry angst to it, but it somehow manages to keep melody always in the focus, that these songs are they're all catchy. You can all sing along to them, even though they have I don't know, almost a post-metal vibe in some ways, but it's just listen to the first song, Teenage Riot. That song is just groovy and catchy and melodic, but also really angry at the same time. And I think this album is just incredible. So.
Yeah, I think The Sprawl too is a perfect New York City song.
Yeah.
And Kim Gordon had an interesting comment in her autobiography where she said, New York is a great city because it acts out the anxiety for anxious people. And I think that song is a perfect encapsulation.
Yeah,
of that
anxiety
idea.
is like probably like the number one feeling that is evoked from this album. Not that it makes you feel uncomfortable or anything, but there's like so much tension within all these songs, within the guitars and within the vocals, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. At number 3, I have an album that I probably would have placed higher if I was being truly honest. But at number 3, The Replacements, Let It Be. Just from the title, completely ripping off the Beatles, naming it Let It Be. But I think that this is probably the best straightforward rock album of the 80s. The Replacements are a band of just insane stories of debauchery, and I think that this is their best album, and it perfectly encapsulates that with, from extremely touching ballads like Unsatisfied, which basically has no lyric except that I'm unsatisfied, to songs like Tommy Gets His Tonsils Out, which is about a dentist who wants to get their bassist's tonsils out because he wants to go play golf. And also a weird addition to the album, but cover of Kiss's song Black Diamond is on this album.
Okay.
But I think that the Replacements have a really great pop sensibility for songs like, obviously, Unsatisfied, I Will Dare, Favorite Thing, Androgynous. I just think that this album really takes the earlier, punkier, more hardcore stuff of early Replacements and melds it with kind of what they would later become with like big singles like Alex Chilton or Can't Hardly Wait. And I don't know, just have a real connection with this album, and I absolutely love it.
Another one I haven't listened to is I haven't listened to like so much of this 80s punk stuff.
Yeah.
Only like post-punk stuff like Joy Division and The Cure.
Yeah, I feel like the Replacements are an interesting kind of like foray into that because they like were a punk band, and then this album is almost like Bruce Springsteen, Heartland rock. They're from Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
And there's definitely a big like Midwestern
Interesting.
like angst on this album.
All right, I'm gonna have to give it a listen.
Yeah.
All right, my number 2 is The Smiths, The Queen Is Dead. Love this album. I love The Smiths. I think their self-titled could have been in this spot also, and maybe Meat Is Murder, which I also really like. Not as crazy about Strange Ways, but The Queen Is Dead is so good. Like I think it's only 10 tracks, but like every song on there is awesome, and it never repeats itself. The thing is, what people have with the Smiths is like they can't get past Morrissey's voice a lot of the time. It's very yawny and kind of depressing, but that's not what the music is at all. Like it's really catchy. Johnny Marr's guitar work is always like really hooky, beautiful, upbeat, and the things that Morrissey says across this album are kind of like humorous at times. Like it's rarely, he rarely sings about heavy stuff. He just gets like, maybe on There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, it's like a little sad, and sometimes he gets political, but this album is just awesome. It's got some of my favorite songs of all time, like There Is a Light That Never Goes Out, and very underrated song, possibly my favorite guitar riff of all time, is on Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others. Yeah. At the end, that song just kind of goes on. It's like stupid lyrics, but like in a tongue-in-cheek way. Just listen to the song, but very underrated, but it's just I think it's one of the greatest pop albums of all time. Like the Smiths sounded like no one at their time, and no one has ever sounded like them in the same way. And you can hear their influence, and maybe some indie pop, like guitar work, like Real Estate kind of has similar vibes in that sense. But they had such a great chemistry, especially with Marr and Morrissey, that has never been captured by anyone else in music, I think. And it's just a really catchy, beautiful, fun listen. Like, I don't know, it's like one of the most popular albums of all time too. So if you haven't listened to it, you got to check it out.
Yeah, it's essential.
Yeah.
At number 2, I have probably my favorite alt rock record of the 80s, the Pixies with Doolittle. This is an album that I've been listening to for a very, very long time. Like the past 4 years, this has pretty much been on pretty constant rotation for me. And one of the things that I like most about this album is Frank Black's vocals. He'll go from a weird, like almost whispery, kind of creepy voice to like a yowling scream, especially on songs like Tame or Crackety Jones, which I think is actually a very, very underrated song. Even though it's just about a guy named Crackety Jones or Jose Jones, I guess this is his actual name. But I think the melding of like pop sensibilities with really abrasive guitar work and vocals is really amazing on this album. And as you already said, I think every song on this album is awesome. The opening lyric, slicing up eyeballs.
Yeah, which is like a reference to like some silent Spanish film or something. It's just is bizarre. That Debaser slaps so hard. Debaser.
Amazing song. Skate 2, Skate 3. A lot of skateboarding video games have influenced my music.
I've never been a skate video game guy, so I kind of missed out on that.
Big on that. That's this whole list. But yeah, Pixies Doolittle. I mean, if you haven't listened to it, check it out. It doesn't have Where Is My Mind, which is the big Pixies single.
Surfer Rosa is also a good album.
Surfer Rosa could have easily been in this spot. It probably would have been on here somewhere, but I didn't want to repeat any artists.
Same. Otherwise, I would have had like the Smiths self-titled on here as well.
Yeah.
Maybe another Cure album. I don't know.
And also, I think Pixies' first release, Come On Pilgrim, is also amazing and somehow even weirder than Surfer Rosa or this album. Every Pixies album is good except for the ones that came after Doolittle. But
I agree with that. I don't even like Bossa Nova. It just sounds too flat. I don't know.
Silly album.
All right, should we get into our honorable mentions?
Yes.
I'll rattle mine off real quick. Michael Jackson, Thriller. Dinosaur Jr., You're Living All Over Me. Depeche Mode, Music for the Masses. Love Depeche Mode. I mentioned them when I talked about Tears for Fears, but Violator, I think, has become one of my favorite albums of all time, but I did not listen to it till after we did our 90s list because it dropped in 1990. Music for the Masses is not as good, but still great, so that one's on there. U2, War, Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA, and the Stone Roses self-titled LP.
Sweet. All right. Mine's a little bit longer, but I'll just rattle them through. Minor Threat, their whole discography. They released like 3 EPs or 2 EPs in an album, but you could get through it on like 30 minutes. I'll just count that as one record. Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique. Kate Bush, Hounds of Love. Black Flag, My War. They Might Be Giants with Lincoln. Purple Rain by Prince. Rain Dogs by Tom Waits. Power, Corruption, and Lies by New Order. Philip Glass, Glassworks. Daniel Johnson, Songs of Pain. And Steve McQueen by Prefab Sprout.
Okay.
I forgot the name of that band for a second.
I have not heard of that, but
good like synth pop, fun 80s stuff.
But one of your honorable mentions is actually my number one. Do you want to guess what it is?
Prince.
No.
Beastie Boys.
No, I do like Sign of the Times though by Prince was close to being an honorable mention. It's just too long. But
yeah, go for it.
All right. Kate Bush, The Hounds of Love. What an album. This is an album that I probably listened to for the first time maybe a year or two ago, but it just gets better with time, especially when you see where pop music, especially like female vocal pop music is today. Her influence is like so clearly there, and like with that context, going back and listening to this album, like it's really incredible how forward thinking she was with her music. Her previous album, The Dreaming, is also really good, but I'm pretty sure Hounds of Love was the first one that she self-produced, and it's like mind-blowing to me that like she's like, I'll give it a hand at producing myself, and she just makes an album that is just incredible. Like this album is so good. The first song, Running Up That Hill, is like an essential, and that song is probably the safest one on the album too, because it gets weird after that point. The way this album is structured is like it's in 2 parts. The first 5 or 6 songs are like her pop songs. It's like the first movement or something, like Cloud Busting, Running Up That Hill, Big Sky, Mother Stands for Comfort. These songs are all beautiful, catchy, straightforward songs. The production, it just feels big and catchy, but without being over the top. Like the Cure album that has a lot of stuff going on. This doesn't, but it sounds like it does, and it's fascinating. Like I don't know, like you can hear all of these production quirks and stuff, and some of her vocal quirks in like Grimes, in FKA Twigs, in Lorde, even in Billie Eilish or something like that. And
I think Charlie XCX.
Charlie XCX is another big one. Like Kate Bush, I think is just completely an incredible artist, and like quickly has become one of my favorites of all time. But the second half of the album is where it gets weird, and it's more of like a soundscape. It starts off with A Dream of Sheep, and the songs are shorter and they kind of flow into each other more, and it's more for playing around with sounds, getting a bit weirder. but it doesn't feel like two random albums spliced together. Like it works all like so well together. One of my favorite moments on the album is "Waking the Witch," which it's like the first minute or so is just these really beautiful piano chords, and then all these vocal samples of people telling like you to wake up. And I think it's cut from like movies or TV shows, and they're all people in like different accents and voices. So it'll be like, "You must wake up, child," and "Child, wake up," and it's like all these things spliced together, and then I don't know. It sounds like someone's being welcomed to the afterlife. And
Yeah.
it's hard to explain, but it's so beautiful. And then it gets like crazy and has like these deep, like warped vocals over like abrasive synth noises and stuff. But never once does like anything in this album feel out of place. Like it all feels so natural and just, I don't know. It is just an incredible piece of music. I 100% recommend this album to anyone. Like anyone who likes pop music, like you got to listen to this thing. It's so good. Yeah. But Kate Bush, Hounds of Love, that is my number one album of the 1980s.
And at my number one, I have Talking Heads, Remain in Light.
Yeah.
To me, this is just the epitome of everything the Talking Heads did, from their more experimental stuff to their more pop-oriented stuff. It's really interesting the way this album was created, with Brian Eno having the rhythm section of the band kind of lay down parts at this studio that was in the Bahamas, and basically splicing that up almost like found sounds and kind of creating these songs from patchwork, which is really surprising when you listen to the album, because it all sounds so cohesive. Obviously, it is super influenced by like Afrobeat stuff like Fela Kuti, who will probably be on my 70s list if we get there. Yeah, and I think this album is really diverse too in terms of what the Talking Heads does, where Once in a Lifetime sounds like a televangelist preacher, like
Yeah,
kind
it
of like
does.
spouting off.
First
about
time I
stuff.
heard that song was in the Downsizing trailer.
Really?
Yeah, and it fits
Wow.
that trailer well, and that movie's not great.
Yeah, a cool
Yeah.
concept, I guess. I also should note, like, that's probably my favorite song of all time. Like,
Really?
all time, yeah. To songs like, Listening Wind, which is a crazy song about African colonization and like terrorism, to a song like The Overload, which just sounds like Joy Division,
Yeah.
which is it's super dark, maybe the darkest Talking Head song. And just those opening tracks with the vocal looping and David Byrne's completely insane voice that he obviously is very famous for.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think this album is also interesting because it kind of is a new wave album with the synthesizers, and but it still has like an interesting edge to it with all of the like African music influence and Brian Eno's production value. But I think that it actually stands as like a really, really solid new wave record, as well as like an experimental record. And yeah,
It ages so well.
Yeah, there really is like nothing at this level that has been made since, I think. And yeah, Talking Heads, Remain in Light, album of the 80s.
Some great lists. I think that's what makes this our list like why when people listen to 80s music, or like they think of like Journey and like really corny stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the 80s maybe gets a bad rap for that in terms of their music, but I think this list kind of shows that this stuff really can stand the test of time. Like all of the albums that we listed, at least the ones that, I'm assuming the ones I haven't listened to on your list are the same thing.
Yeah, there's some terrible albums on this that you should never listen to. They've aged badly. No,
but they all like have their own unique thing. Like these albums that we listed are all so very different, and it's crazy that like the 80s was a weird transitional point for music, and it was just kind of like covered with like cheesy synth pop. But the stuff that did really like stand the test of time is really, really incredible. Like I think the top 3 albums on my list I would consider some like a top 20 albums of all time at least.
Yeah.
Top 15 probably, but it's a cool decade. Like I said, not my favorite, but I'm happy with the stuff I put first.
Yeah, I'm happy with my list too.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me come on
Of
the pod
course.
again.
Yeah, thanks for coming by, Fritz. We'll do 70s soon. We got time. We can do 70s and 60s.
Yeah, absolutely.
We won't do 50s. I think we made the
Yeah.
joke last time. It would just be like, I can talk about Kinda Blue.
Yeah,
by
there's
Miles Davis.
one Miles Davis album I've listened to in the 60s. That would be the one.
And then maybe like an Elvis compilation.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, just like Hawaiian music. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Thank thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope some people out there enjoy these lists as much as I do. I do get some people who wonder when the next one's coming out. So thank you. Thank that person.
Thank you, viewers.
Yes. And maybe in a month and a half or so, we'll be back with the 70s. So until then, I've been Hank Michaels. This has been Fordham Firesides. Goodbye.